Thank you for inviting me. Some subjects are easy to present a lesson, and others are difficult. And I have to appreciate all of the speakers today because this has not been a day of easy subjects. I wish that there had been more young people here because some of the things that have been said definitely they need to hear because they're not going to get it anywhere else. But as we've talked about, as the theme of this is 7 deadly sins, it's kind of depressing, isn't it? Well, sin is depressing, and it's something that will bring us all down if we allow it to get into our lives and take over, of course. Kind of reminded me of, well, you can get the skit on YouTube. Just put in Bob Newhart, Stop It. If you've never seen that, it's kind of interesting, and I think it really says a lot. You know, people are going through a lot of counseling and things, and I don't mean to denigrate that, but sometimes we just need simple 2 words concerning inappropriate activity, thoughts, whatever. It is stop it. And that's the way our attitude should be about sin, everything that stands against what God would have us to be full, whole, and happy individuals. Calling murder euthanasia. Murder is a subject that has captured the attention of many people. If you were to look at the TV schedules, the guides and such, how many of these films and situation weekly shows and such, it all seems to center somewhere has to do with killing. And murder, of course, is usually the theme, and some of it's gotten pretty grisly, and it's easy to see by looking at that and seeing what's going on in so much of society today in real life that murder is a real problem. Then there are those that will speak against murder and misapply it by saying that we're against capital punishment because it's murder. It's not, that is not murder. That is authorized killing of someone. And we need to know the difference. And so in the manuscript, I have added the legal analysis of murder as described in Wikipedia, which is not an authority, should we say, but it was applicable here for us today and for this subject. It says the elements of common law murder are the killing of a human being by another human being with malice aforethought. So here are some things that need to take place. It says that common law, life ends with cardiopulmonary arrest, the total and permanent cessation of blood circulation and respiration. With advances in medical technology, courts have adopted irreversible cessation of all brain function as a mark of the end of life. We could take exception to that because there are exceptions in life. People have been declared brain dead by the so-called experts, and they have been kept on life support, and sometimes they wake up and they're able to go on. I remember a lady that was a member of our congregation many years ago who had a lot of medical problems. And she used to talk about the Stephen Johnson syndrome that I believe was described, where she had taken some medication before that caused this rare disease. And she was in the hospital this one time, and her daughter had said, don't do anything extra for her. They had declared that she was basically brain dead. Well, guess what? She recovered. And afterwards, I remember her saying, "Why did you try to kill me?" to her daughter. And made her feel pretty bad. She was trying to make the best decision that she could based on the information that was given to her and she, of course, was given some information that wasn't 100%. What does that say to you and me? Well, it says a lot concerning the subject of euthanasia. And first of all, I do want to say in the Bible we find that murder is a capital crime which is deserving of death to the perpetrator. In Genesis chapter 9 and verse 6, "Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man." We find that God is the giver of life, and he is also the taker of life. And when we interject our will for God's will, we certainly are countermanding God's rules for life itself. And we have to be very careful that we don't fall into this kind of a trap. And euthanasia speaks to that, as we'll get into just a little bit later. Euthanasia, also called mercy killing, is the act or practice of painlessly putting or assisting to death persons suffering from painful and many times incurable disease or incapacitating physical disorder, or allowing them to die by withholding treatment or withdrawing artificial life support measures. It is usually regarded as either suicide if performed by the patient himself, or murder if performed by another. Today, it's getting a little cloudy in the professional field, the medical and the legal field. Physicians may lawfully decide not to prolong life in cases of extreme suffering, and they may administer drugs to relieve pain, even if this shortens the patient's life. This is a situation where you may have or know of someone that is coming towards the end of life with a debilitating illness or just age-related weakness and such. Maybe it's because of some terrible disease that's just causing so much pain and suffering for the individual that you don't want to see a loved one suffer. We can all sympathize with all of these things, of course. How do we cope with this? How do we decide what kind of medical care or the lack of medical care should be given to an individual? When do we let nature, shall we say, take its course? Well, if you've ever made out a will, and if you haven't, I hope that you will, and you'll go and get legal help with that, even though you don't have to have it. Along with this, going hand in hand with this, is advance directives or a living will that is wise to have made out ahead of time. Living wills are commonly a part of will-making process. The purpose of these documents is to state your wishes as to what course of action should be followed concerning your medical care if you are unable to communicate your wishes. With the advances in medicine, families and loved ones are often put in the difficult and heartbreaking position of deciding what should be done for the patient when he cannot speak for himself and has not made out a living will. The potential of modern medical practice to prolong life through technological means has provoked the question of what should be done next if the patient is incapable of choices. The charge to do no harm, a tenet that doctors have followed for a long time, seems to be questioned today when this comes to mind of these situations. Passively doing nothing to prolong life or withdrawing life support measures has in some cases resulted in criminal charges being brought against physicians. On the other hand, the families of comatose and apparently terminal patients have sometimes instituted legal action against the medical establishment to make them stop the use of extraordinary life support. A few years ago, many years ago, it was in the limelight in Florida here about just such a case where the husband wanted to end the life support for his wife that had been comatose for years. They said that there was no brain activity, that she was just alive by the life support. And he wanted that to stop. He saw no future in that. Where do we stand in such a situation? Well, we know if we didn't have the medical advancements that we have today, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, we know that nature would take its course. The person's unconscious, can't eat, can't drink, can't do any of those things, so how long would they last? As Christians, what should we do when faced with these situations? The subject is one that requires knowledge of God's Word to be able to make the right decisions concerning our health care. How much pain medication can we administer safely to that patient who is suffering so much? If you give them too much, you may cause a cardiac arrest, which in a sense would be killing the patient. Even though today they claim that can't be the case, I think that we know better than that, because how many people do we read about that die from drug overdose? When my mother was in a nursing home and had had a stroke, they said that she was brain dead. It was a massive stroke. This was many years ago. She was totally unresponsive, brain dead, of course, that's what they said. No activity, 90-some years old, had lived a full life. What do we do? Well, a niece that was in the medical field, she instructed the doctors there, this was up in Ohio, whatever you do, don't administer that medicinal cocktail that so often is a part of this to put the person out. Don't do that. And we did not allow that to happen. But we did not insist on a feeding tube. Did we make the right decision? I don't know. You see, we are put in the position sometimes of playing God, it seems like, and we don't want to be put in that position. So it's something that many of us may have to face in the future, and some in the past have. The following excerpts from the Adult Years, a Time Life book, written, notice, in 1975, is relevant to the subject of euthanasia and the emotional impact of death and dying. I've condensed from what the book showed. It had several pictures and such of this, but I'll show or go over just this part here. One day, Gramp removed his false teeth and announced that he was no longer going to eat. By now, his physical condition had seriously deteriorated, and he committed himself to face the end with determination. The family agonized over their responsibility. He could have been hospitalized for intravenous feeding, but they decided against it. The thought of this independent man strapped to a bed with tubes protruding from his arms was repugnant to us, says Mark. Fast forward. He died at age 81, exactly 3 weeks after he started to fast, succeeding in his determination to die on his own terms. His family's grief was tempered with awe, Mark remembers. We felt an enormous amount of respect for this tough old coal miner. Looking at his empty bed, I thought, "You pulled it off, Gramp. You really pulled it off." As you can see, the bias of the author of this article, he's already decided that there is a time when life is not worth living anymore. We are all expendable. If we were to go by the intellectuals and the most wealthy people in the world, the Bilderbergers, who meet each year to decide and map out, and we don't know exactly what's going on because it's a super secret organization, but some things are out there. They have already, it's been, I guess, leaked out somehow, that the world population is way too high, and they have determined that 589 million, I believe it was, is the right number of people for the world. 589 million. What do we do with the rest of them? COVID? What's going on behind the scenes that we don't even know? There have been many natural catastrophes through the ages that have wiped out large segments of population, besides the wars and such that have come and gone. But yes, we do have an exploding population, but we do have a God that already knows the end before the beginning. He knows how many people this world will sustain, and He sustains it by His power. And no matter how much man may pollute, how much he may destroy, God has still made this biosphere called Earth capable of doing what it needs to do as long as God sees fit to keep this world going. But the elites seem to forget God in their equations, but we can't. Let's analyze this story I just read to you, and you may have some other thoughts concerning this, but some things that came to my mind. First, we must remember, first and foremost, that life is a gift from God. God is the giver and the taker of life. When anyone trifles with this gift, when one presumes to play God and decide to end that life, he is acting contrary to God's will. Everyone should respect God and accept His will, no matter how difficult it may be. Most of us can feel sympathy for the trying circumstances endured by many facing a very difficult death process. When Gramp decided to die on his own terms, he decided to ignore God's will by imposing his own will. This is suicide, no matter how long it takes. He did not choose the brave course, but the coward's choice, in my eyes. Pride would not allow him to live his life, no matter how long he had left, with the thought of invasive or inconvenient restrictions. Compare that attitude with that of countless veterans who have endured horrific injuries. and still find a reason to carry on with their disabilities. They understand that life truly is a gift to be savored every day. After all, that is all that we have today. Thank God for each day, good or evil, rain or shine. Be thankful and remember His blessings. Secondly, we should do things on God's terms, not on our terms. Where's the satisfaction in defying God and doing it my way? Thirdly, when one cuts off his life, he is depriving loved ones of another chance to enjoy their company, to miss another sweet memory of some kind word or deed. We need to face the challenges before us, no matter how difficult they may be, with the attitude that it's not over until God says it's over. What if Joseph had given up when his brothers cast him in a pit? What if Naaman had stopped after dipping in the Jordan 6 times? What if the Israelites had stopped after marching around Jericho 6 times on the 7th day? What if Jesus, after hanging on that cross, before his death, he decided, that's enough, I'm getting down? He could have. He could have called 10,000 angels to deliver him. No, it wasn't pride that kept him on the cross. It caused him to endure the suffering that he suffered. It was love. Love of God and love of you and me. We need to remember how precious life is. Euthanasia deprives us of the opportunity to extend compassion, to care for the terminally ill, to minister to their physical and emotional and spiritual needs. Hospice workers report a recurring sentiment in the last words of many patients as they have received loving care, where they tell their loved ones and others, I love you. Last words are precious, are they not? Last words of Jesus on the earth before he ascended into heaven. Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end. Oh, we need to comfort one another. What will our last words be? Euthanasia is not a novel concept. We read about it in this situation with Saul as he was mortally wounded in battle. And he asked his armor bearer to slay him because he knew if the enemy got a hold of him that he was in for some really tough times. But his armor bearer would not do that. And so he fell on his own sword rather than face whatever was going to happen. I don't know about you, but I grew up with Westerns, and I'm a Western fan, always have been. And you would get indoctrinated with this whole idea about the guy that's captured by the Indians, he's being tortured. And somebody's off and he's hearing the cries of this person as they're being tortured and everything. And so the one person slips up with a rifle in the distance and shoots him and puts him out of his misery. Or the one where they would say to the girl, the woman, say, here's a gun, remember you saved the last bullet for yourself, when surrounded and assaulted by the Indians. Well, we could talk about Jack Kevorkian, the T4 program that's in the book. My 5 minutes are already been signaled to me. And I didn't know that I was even going to use half of this. You know, America was even using through eugenics, and I ask that you read about eugenics, which is so closely tied with euthanasia. But here's the scary part about this. There may come a time in this world, in this country, where when you reach a certain age, you are considered no more useful. And you need to go away. 3/4 of a century, time for you to go away. Well, I'm not ready. I've still got some living to do. Nah, you've had a good time. If you didn't get it right by now, you never will. We need to make room for some more people, right? This is the way the world would look at it without God. We need to take the time to think these things through before blindly following the so-called science. I say so-called science. Remember with the COVID? Shooting from the hip? Oh yeah. Wear a mask? Don't wear a mask. What's the right thing to do? Get the shot? Don't get the shot. So-called science is not always on track, on target. We need to understand that it is not our right or responsibility to take God's place when it comes to life and death, for sure. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Job 1:21. And I'll close with this one thing. In John chapter 21 and verse 18, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, when thou wast young, thou girdest thyself, and walkest whither thou wouldest. But when thou shalt be old, thou shalt stretch forth thy hands, and another shall gird thee, and carry thee whither thou wouldest not. Thus spake he, signifying by what death he should glorify God. Of course, this is Jesus speaking of Peter. What kind of a death will we glorify God by? Certainly not by one that gives up and decides to check out on our terms. Let it be according to God's will. Thank you.